What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Baumbastic Podcast presented by Inside Arkansas and hosted by Andrew Ellis. I hope everyone is staying safe and warm on this beautiful winter wonderland of a January 10th. We are now 35 days away from Arkansas's season opener, and you can always tell Arkansas baseball is right around the corner whenever Fayetteville first starts getting snow. I've lived up here for, I guess, 4 years now, and every year it's like about a month before baseball season is right when there's a tough snowstorm, and hopefully there won't be another one, because I remember in 2022 there was a tough one in kind of mid-February while Arkansas was down in Round Rock. But again, I hope everyone is staying safe, staying warm. Hopefully you're off work or at least get to work from home today. And I won't take too much of your time. When I first started, relaunching the Baumbastic Podcast, my goal, honestly, was to have a bunch of like 10, 15-minute videos. I've strayed away from that very quickly. We're getting to about 35, 40 minutes of pop there. And I still obviously don't mind doing that. I like to ramble, like to hear what you guys have to say. But I just wanted to hop on here real quick and give a quick reaction to something that actually came out a few days ago. I guess it was Monday or Tuesday. Perfect Game, the outlet, the site that does college baseball, pro baseball, scouting, all that, released their top 25. And as you can see here, Arkansas comes in at number 13, and there were a lot of people who had a noticeable reaction to that, thought that was a little bit too low for Arkansas, and thought it was disrespectful. All that, that's fine and dandy. Really, I wasn't planning on talking about this like publicly at all. Maybe referenced it and just kind of used it as something to note. And it is the first major poll, so I think it is kind of notable. It's our first real look at kind of how the nation is going to view Arkansas going into the season. But as you know, if you've been following college baseball for a while, there's usually a lot of fluctuation, a lot of variation between the major outlets, the major polls. There's also at least 175 different outlets, different websites that rank college baseball teams. My guy Andrew Hutchinson even at one point started doing his own poll where it was like a collection of different polls. And so college baseball poll, for a sport that is not like the biggest needle mover nationally in terms of like national attention, just an insane amount of people that rank college baseball teams. So if you think your team's great, you can find a poll out there that definitely supports that claim. But obviously, a lot of people, when Razorback fans see that, Arkansas has been a consistent, top 5, top 10 program, maybe even top 3. I think actually in SEC play, they might be leading the conference in wins over the last like 7-8 years. So you can make a case, obviously, hey, Arkansas's got a lot of talent on this team. There's a lot of people who have high expectations, myself included. And so they see that 13 and they were baffled by that. I wasn't really planning on talking about it. I agree that it's a little low for Arkansas, and I expect other polls to have Arkansas higher, but I wasn't planning on saying anything until the rest of the week played out and Perfect Game started releasing, all these lists of their All-American teams, their top freshmen in the country, their top sophomores in the country, their top juniors in the country. And Arkansas is like littered all over these lists. And so I'm like, okay, that's cool. And obviously we're going to celebrate that and give our guys props for that. But then I was like trying to do the math, and I'm like, how do you have Arkansas's entire team damn near in your rankings, in your preseason All-American? You're giving them all these awards, but you have them 13th. And so, I just wanted to talk about it a little bit, kind of make sense of kind of what the nation thinks about Arkansas. And when I say the nation, I mean Perfect Game. Which I know some people see the low ranking and they're just like, well, you know what? Perfect Game sucks. Which is, I think that's sometimes stupid, but I think Perfect Game is very valuable in terms of a scouting standpoint. Like they do a really good job of going all around, sending guys all around the country. Even when these guys are in high school, obviously for high school rankings, player rankings, I should say, like they're about as good as it gets. Might even be like the standard them and Prep Baseball Report. And I guess you could throw a Baseball America in there, but they do a really good job of kind of keeping track of the game from a scouting standpoint. I don't know if their team coverage or their team rankings and all that are necessarily like the end all be all, but again, they look at things from a very scouting perspective. And so again, I thought it was kind of interesting that they're obviously very high on a lot of Arkansas players, but not necessarily high on Arkansas as a team. So we'll pull up that top 25 up here real quick. So as you can see, A&M, who's lost in the CWS finals series against Tennessee. They're number 1. They've got Jace Laviolette, probably the best player in the country. They've got a loaded group of returners. When Jim Schlossnagle left to take the Texas job, we'll get to them in a second. A lot of people kind of thought maybe A&M might take a step back and they might lose their entire roster. Did not happen. The Aggies are loaded. Whether you think they're number one, maybe you can make a case for one or two other teams, but on paper, like that's, it makes sense. LSU's a team who didn't have a great year last year by any means, but obviously Jay Johnson's done a really good job recruiting, kind of elevating that program. They did a good job in the portal. And so you see kind of some of the familiar names there, like Virginia came off of a College World Series appearance. Florida State had a really good year under Link Jarrett. They made the College World Series last year. Like a lot of these kind of make sense, but I was kind of going through it because I was thinking, obviously, the first thing that we've got to address as Arkansas fans, if you're going to be mad about the rankings, which, again, I think they're low. I'm not saying you shouldn't be mad. The one thing you've got to address is that Arkansas has choked in the postseason the last 2 years, right? I mean, like that's something that it's kind of the elephant in the room of like, we can argue about the baseball team and we could push we can really make the case that Arkansas is going to be awesome this year. And I am making that case. I've been doing it for months. But the sentence has to start with, I know they've choked in the postseason the last 2 years, but, and then whatever you want to say after that. And again, I'm like seriously not making light of it. Like I'm doing the same thing, but when I first saw the ranking, that was kind of the first thing that came to my mind. But then I looked at it a little closer. 4 of the top 12 teams in this top 12, the 12 teams that are above Arkansas, were bounced in there in the regional round. And I believe that would include LSU was bounced in the Chapel Hill regional. You got A&M, or Texas was bounced in the A&M regional. Duke was bounced in the Oklahoma regional, and Arizona was bounced in there in the Tucson regional, the Arizona State regional. Arizona is one that like I just surprised me because they haven't been on that elite level. Arizona is a historically very good baseball program. I feel like the last few years they haven't necessarily been that. Like they came to Fayetteville as a 3 seed a couple years ago, and they were the first team eliminated. Like weren't a threat at all. Lost in the Tucson regional last year. I don't keep up with Arizona recruiting. I don't know what they have coming back or anything like that. But I thought that was interesting that a third of the top 12 teams were bounced in the regional round. And then you got 3 teams that were bounced in the super regional round. I mean, Georgia had a really good year last year where got a national seed under Wes Johnson, took a massive step forward. They've got a lot of talent. They're always going to be very good. They were bounced in the super regional as well. Clemson was bounced in the super regional round. Oregon State was bounced in the super regional round. And then you've got 5 College World Series teams where, like, we can argue who's going to be good. I understand that rankings aren't necessarily a what did you do last year thing, but like if you're a Hog fan upset about the rankings, it's pretty hard to be upset about teams that were like in the College World Series last year. Even a team like Florida, who didn't have a great regular season, a team that Arkansas beat head to head. But they went to the College World Series last year. They're always going to have a lot of talent. They've got a championship winning head coach. Like you kind of give them the benefit of the doubt there. But I did just kind of think that was interesting. Arkansas being 13. And so, you kind of go to, okay, well, they choke in the postseason, but a lot of teams up there in that top 10, top 12 that also choked, so to speak, in the postseason. Moving on to the list a little bit. So the first thing that came out, and now this is where if you're making the case against perfect game, I'll hear you out because I thought this was interesting and I even tweeted about it. So they put out their All-American teams, first and second team All-Americans. Here's the first team, as you see, Jace Laviolette, the A&M guy. He's the headliner here. But you look at that pitching down there. Landon Beidelshees, Arkansas's Ohio State transfer left-handed pitcher, who, by the way, he wears number 35, and we are 35 days away. So shout out to Landon Beidelshees, a guy I think is going to be very good, very talented. We've talked about him a lot on this podcast. They have him as a first-team preseason All-American starting pitcher. And then I see Gabe Gackel's name down there next to RP, meaning relief pitcher. So someone forgot to give Perfect Game the memo that Gabe Gackel's not coming out of the bullpen. Like, that's just not a thing that's happening. Now, obviously, Gabe Gackel last year was Arkansas's primary closer. I don't even think he started a single game. So I guess they just looked at the numbers and saw, okay, this is a relief pitcher. He was very good last year. Let's make him the best reliever in the country in our preseason rankings. Like, I kind of get how they came to that conclusion. But again, make one quick phone call, ask around. People would have told you Gabe Gackel is going to be Arkansas's ace. In fact, he's like the one guy Dave Van Horn ruled out as a possible bullpen guy. He's like, no, I got starting. That's the plan for him. We all kind of knew this was happening. So I thought that was interesting. But again, like I'm not going to complain about first team preseason All-American recognition for our guys, especially an alum of the Baumbastic Podcast and Gabe Gackel. So you have 2 Arkansas rotation pieces potentially as first-team All-Americans, and I should also mention second-team All-American. You see the full team here, and down there at the bottom, Zach Root, the ECU, the East Carolina transfer, left-handed starting pitcher for Arkansas. Root actually, Gackle is the guy I just said is like a lock to not be in the closing situation. Like he's going to be in the rotation. He's a lock to be either the Friday or Saturday guy. I would say Root is probably the next closest in terms of locks to be in the rotation, which is interesting because he's on the second team and Beidle is on the first team. So here's where it's like I got to give Perfect Game their props. I agree with that assessment. Like I think Beidle is the more talented pitcher. Not by a huge margin. Like I think Root is going to end up being like a third to fifth round type of pick. I think Beidle has a little bit more more juice in the tank there. I think he's the better overall pitcher, but I actually do think there's a chance that Gage Wood ends up being in that Arkansas rotation. And if he is, that would mean Beidle is likely a back end of the bullpen closing type of guy. Again, we'll see what happens. I really don't know if there's, I don't want to make an assumption one way or the other. I still probably think it'll be Beidle, but Gage Wood is a very serious candidate to be in the Arkansas rotation. And if he is, me personally, I think it is Beidle who ends up being the guy who moves his role around. And we talked about it on the podcast a few weeks ago. It's more about Beidle and kind of what he brings to the table as a pitcher and some of his skill set that I think would be very useful as a high velocity, high leverage lefty out of the bullpen. I think that's intriguing to me. But I did just, again, wanted to think that was interesting that, Beidle is first team All-American as a starting pitcher. And it's not even like a foregone conclusion. It's probably going to happen, but it's not a foregone conclusion that he is in Arkansas starting rotation. Now, opening weekend, Arkansas plays 4 games. So, of course, you'll probably see all 4 of those guys, although who knows? They started Colin Fisher last year. Wouldn't surprise me at all if they threw Cole Gibbler in there and then left one of those veterans in the bullpen. But it is going to be very interesting. Now, moving on a little bit to some of what Perfect Game has been putting out here lately. They did their top freshmen in the country, top 75 freshman players in the country. I tweeted about this yesterday. I actually didn't really read the release at first and thought it was just top 75 pitchers because they had Carson Wiggins at 12 and Cole Gibbler, who I'm a huge fan of, at 57, number 57. And so I was like, dude, they think there's 56 pitchers that are freshmen that are better than Cole Gibbler. It was overall players. Hand up, that's on me. But as you see, Carson Wiggins, look at him, looking nice there at the top of the graphic. He's the number 12 overall freshman in the country, according to Perfect Game. And I mentioned Gibbler, who is kind of, I feel like, flying a little too far under the radar for my liking. And he's got a lot of respect as a prospect. He is number 57 in the country. I think that one's one that's gonna probably, I think you could afford to see him move up a little bit. But again, so this is what Perfect Game is saying to you. They're saying Arkansas is the 13th best team in the country, but your entire starting rotation is a preseason All-American, even the one guy that we didn't have pegged as a preseason All-American because we forgot to make a phone call. We also think you have 2 of the top 75 freshmen in the country. And now they also released a list of top 75 sophomores. Now, also, I'm gonna go. I'll give a hand up here. Not a Perfect Game subscriber, so I don't even know what the full list looks like. The Razorback baseball account didn't tweet out anything about Nolan Souza, so I'm going to assume he wasn't in that top 75. But I mean, frankly, I think he should be. Hell, I think he's actually more of a lock to be very good this year than Ryder Helfrich, who you see at number 23, Arkansas's catcher, who had his ups and downs last year, had a really productive offseason, whether it was in the Cape or in the fall at Arkansas. And Gabe Gackle, Arkansas's potential Friday night starter, number 12 overall in the country in terms of sophomore prospects. And you see him there listed in the top of the graphic. So again, I'm just trying to add all the pieces together. Perfect Game is saying that Arkansas's entire starting rotation is a All-American, among the 15 best pitchers in the entire country. Gackle, whom they have number 12 in his class. Carson Wiggins, not listed in that that preseason All-American. He's top 12 in his class as well. A really dynamic arm. They think the catcher, Ryder Helfrich, is going to take a massive step forward, which I agree. I think Ryder Helfrich is going to be very good. I just don't know how you add all of that up necessarily and come to the conclusion that Arkansas would be 13th, unless you're just really thinking hey, there's an issue. They're going to choke in the postseason. Let me just go with it now. But it is very interesting. Usually preseason rankings are talent-based things of what do you have on paper And Perfect Game is agreeing that Arkansas has a lot of talent on paper, but they're still not quite sold on the overall unit. And so what's kind of that missing ingredient? You've got some of the best freshmen in the country. You got some of the best sophomores in the country. By the way, they mentioned they listed a top 75 juniors list recently, and no Arkansas players were listed in the top 25, which is interesting because two of the players that they have listed as Perfect Game All-Americans are juniors, Enroot and Beidelshees. You also have Vahiva Aloy, who, depending on where you look, is always like unanimously a top 50 overall prospect in this class. And definitely, I would say, one of the top 50 to 75 juniors. So I would assume that he's on that list. We'll see. Christian Fouch is another one. He's a junior that is getting a lot of buzz as a draft prospect, a potential like maybe third or fourth round pick. I would assume he would be in that top 75 juniors list as well. I don't have a Perfect Game subscription. I'm not a nerd. So I don't subscribe to Perfect Game. That's a joke. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to assume that some of those guys are on that list. So it's like you look at it and you're like, you feel like Arkansas has blue chip talent in the freshman class, the sophomore class, and the junior class. We know has some blue chip talent. What are they saying about Arkansas where they still have them at number 13? And I think some of the question marks that come with this group, Charles Davalon's a guy that I've not seen mentioned. Maybe he's in that top 75 sophomores list with Nolan Souza and Ryder Helfrich and Gabe Gackle. I think he probably should be, but again, I don't know what that list looks like. Based on the fact that Perfect Game has Arkansas at 13th, I would assume he's not. That he's not a guy that's super on Perfect Game's radar. And then you got some of your seniors that will potentially help you, like a Kendall Diggs, like a Logan Maxwell, like a Rocco Pepe. Those are guys that we haven't seen. Who maybe they'll release a top 75 seniors list, and all three of those guys will be on that list. Kahio Aloy is another one I should mention because he's a projected potential starter of Arkansas. He's a sophomore. Perhaps he's in that top 75 list as well. But again, I'm just kind of doing the math, and I'm like, what doesn't add up? And I think it comes in that lineup where if you're looking at Arkansas's lineup and you have some of these guys who are already being billed as top 75 players in their class, and Vahiva Aloy, who's going to be a top 75 draft pick. If you start to look at some of these other guys, I think that tells you where the disconnect is, why Arkansas is still at number 13. And so I think nationally, as we're trying to figure out what's the case for Arkansas being really good, what's the case for Arkansas being better than people think they are, I think it lies with some of those names I just listed, like a Kendall Diggs, like a Rocco Pepe, like a Logan Maxwell, whoever the hell comes out of that first base battle, whether it's Aloy, whether it's Robinette, whether it's Michael Anderson, you could take your pick, but it would come from that group. Brent Iredale's another one where I just don't think people quite know who Brent Iredale is yet. And so I think that's a very important piece of the puzzle, where Perfect Game obviously does a lot of scouting stuff, and Brent Iredale's a big draft pick, but he's coming from the JUCO ranks. I don't know if Perfect Game is really that tapped in on the JUCO market. And so again, the purpose of this episode really was just to kind of talk it all out and speak about some of Arkansas's, national, like where they're viewed nationally. And so I don't know if what I said makes sense, but I kind of tried to lay it all out there and get a better understanding for kind of why Perfect Game went the way they did. I know a lot of people were heated up about it, were intrigued by it. And so I hope this helped. I hope you learned something. And again, I think while I was talking, I kind of figured out, okay, so where's the disconnect here? Where do people think Arkansas is bad? I think that the question mark still remains the Arkansas lineup. And I know that a lot of fans in the Arkansas fan base are also concerned about that lineup, just based on what we've seen, the offensive decline the last few years. So if you kind of add it all together, it kind of makes sense a little bit. Like when you take the bad postseason results the last couple of years, you take the lineup decline, Perfect Game is basically betting on some of those lesser known pieces in the Arkansas lineup not turning into impact players. Brent Iredale not turning into an impact player. Logan Maxwell, Rocco Pepe, Kendall Diggs not returning back to form. And so that's kind of how they see it. How do you guys see it? Do you feel like that's fair? Do you think that maybe Perfect Game's sleeping on Arkansas a little bit? I know where I lie on that spectrum. I think I definitely think that there are some pieces in this Arkansas lineup that are being overlooked. But at the end of the day, I do want to clarify, I probably should have done this at the very top. Don't worry about preseason stuff. Like, it really doesn't matter at all. It's more just a talking point, which is kind of what we're doing. We're just talking about it. And it's just something to note. And so I think all these pieces of information are interesting. I always like seeing, every time they release a new ranking, I'm excited. I'm like looking to see where Arkansas is, see where their players are ranked. I think it's all valuable information to kind of understand and assess where Arkansas is viewed in the national radar. And so D1 baseball, which is my favorite outlet. Like I'd say the gold standard when it comes to college baseball national coverage. I would say D1 baseball is the elite one. Their top 25 comes out on Monday. And I would imagine right after that, you'll start seeing some All-American list. And I know they do a thing where they go through and rank all the players at every position. So that'll be very interesting. It's something we will absolutely be discussing on this podcast, on this show. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this little miniature shortened edition. We've been trying to be disciplined here the last couple of days, trying to shorten the episodes, not have me rambling for too long, but hope everyone's staying safe. Hope everyone is counting down the days to baseball season the same way I am. Check out Stu Hog's highlight videos. If you get bored, Stu Hog on YouTube is the man for Arkansas baseball stuff. Always has the full game recaps, the highlight videos. I've been starting to dabble with some of those as well, starting to get excited. So again, appreciate everybody tapping in. Make sure you're subscribed to the Inside Arkansas YouTube channel. Leave us a like, leave us a thumbs up, whatever you got to do. Make sure you're subscribed on all the podcast networks if you are not already. The Baumbastic Podcast, you can find it on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast. It's been another beautiful edition of the best damn baseball show in the state. Have a great weekend, everybody.